Roommate let his girlfriend take over our shared apartment, making me sleep on the couch, and now he's surprised I'm moving out. I'm a 41-year-old guy, and I have 2 kids, John, my 22-year-old son, and Sally, my 20-year-old daughter, with my ex-wife. I'm remarried now to my 28-year-old wife. I'm incredibly close with both of my kids, we have our own traditions and a really tight bond. Now, John is engaged to Abby. She seems nice enough, but from the beginning she's been a little too eager to build a relationship with both me and my wife. I get that she doesn't have a close family herself, she's told us plenty of stories about why that is. Some of her complaints about her family don't sound unforgivable to me, but I wasn't there and it's not my place to judge. We've tried to be welcoming. But Abby has a way of forcing herself into family traditions, sometimes in situations where no one outside of the immediate family would have been invited. That's rubbed me, and my wife, a little wrong. Since early in their relationship, she's been calling Sally sis. With my wife, she does this odd thing that's somewhere between sister-in-law and mother-daughter, but nothing quite fits. The part that's hardest for me is how she wants me to be a father figure to her, despite us having no real basis for that kind of connection. I'm not saying we don't get along, just that we're very different people. I don't feel like we've bonded in a way that makes this natural. I have a private tradition with my kids. When they're over, before they leave, the 3 of us have a catch-up in my office/study. It's always been our special time, and it's taken on extra weight lately because, while my kids get along with my wife, they just aren't ready for personal conversations around her yet. Abby once asked to talk with me alone, but I explained our catch-up tradition. John later pulled me aside and asked me to give it a try, explaining Abby had never had a caring one-on-one with her own dad. We compromised. I didn't include her in our tradition, but I did join John and Abby for coffee and listen to her talk. Then, before John even proposed, Abby started calling me dad. John begged me to let her, a whole emotional plea about how I was the dad she always wished she had, and she'd cried seeing how affectionate I was with Sally. Sally still gives me random hugs. I know how lucky I am. I felt awkward, but for John's sake, I let it go. Fine. If it means that much to them, I can handle her calling me dad. But now, Abby wants me to walk her down the aisle. She wants the father-daughter dance, too. I don't want to walk her down the aisle, and dancing is physically hard for me. At my own wedding, I danced only twice, and I use a cane. John has been pleading for me to do at least one of these things, preferably walking her down the aisle. This all really came to a head last Sunday. John and I were talking privately, and I wanted to bring the whole thing up. Abby burst into the room without knocking, and before I could say anything, she asked John if he'd told me yet. As it turns out, she wanted me to say in my wedding speech that I now have a second daughter, and that I love her as such. I just looked at John, because I was floored. She asked if I would walk Sally down the aisle and do a dance, and I said of course, Sally is my daughter. Abby yelled that she was my daughter too, and I told her it would never be the same. Sally is my actual daughter. I tried to explain. I said I'd be happy to talk about her being a wonderful addition to our family, and that I love how happy she makes John. I thought that was fair, a good compromise. But she just broke down and started crying. John apologized. They left in a hurry. Later, John called me from home, nearly begging me to please reconsider. But I just can't bring myself to stand up in front of everyone and say Abby is my daughter, or that I love her like Sally. I can't lie about something so deeply personal. Update 1. I had planned on writing this sooner, but life swept me up in a couple of really wonderful ways, and here I am now, finally able to share an update because I have a surprise-free day. Mother's Day was when it all really came to a head. Every year, my kids and their partners go to visit my ex-wife. Turns out, my ex and Abby are a lot closer than I ever realized, so close, in fact, that Abby calls her mom, which sets the whole stage for what's unfolded. Apparently, my ex has been fueling this bond. On Mother's Day, the wedding talk came up, and every time Abby referred to me, she called me dad. My son asked her to let it go, which sparked yelling, Abby insisting she deserved to be my daughter, my ex backing her up, my son reminding everyone that I really am trying and Abby needed to be realistic. Then Sally jumped in, telling Abby that she only had one daughter, a reaction to Abby suggesting that, as my daughters, she and Sally should unite. According to my son, Abby ended up in tears. According to Sally, she was crying, yelling, and even kicked something before storming to her room. Sally told me she went off on her mom, but refused to elaborate, and frankly, knowing Sally. Yikes. Around 2 a.m., I got a text from Sally's partner's phone. Abby really is great, she hasn't been perfect but you should give her a chance and you will learn to love her. I saw it in the morning, responded, but found out I'd been blocked. I called Sally, but she was driving. That afternoon, she and her partner stopped by. My house is conveniently on the way, plus Sally prefers my liquor and cooking, and they filled me in on the chaos of the night before. I pulled Sally's partner aside at one point and asked if I'd done something to upset her. She was confused and insisted I wasn't blocked, yet when she checked, I was. Then I showed her the text she, supposedly, sent, but it was gone from her phone entirely. We brought in Sally, filled her in, and both of them were definitely not pleased. A few days later, John and Abby showed up out of nowhere, pretty rare in my family, but so be it. I'd made salmon, nothing fancy, but but I quickly whipped up a couple extra portions. My wife served while I made drinks. The whole night, Abby kept trying to steer the conversation back to the wedding, while John tried desperately to redirect her, but she wouldn't let it drop. We began discussing logistics because I'm helping them score some good deals through my professional network when Abby just blurted out, "So I was talking to Mom. She said that you can walk me down the aisle and she'll do the dance, or you can dance and she'll walk. It's your call, but you need to choose soon." I reiterated that I can't dance. She tried to contest this, citing my wedding, and I had to spell out the difference, and that I wasn't comfortable walking her down the aisle, either. She got upset. "Mom loves me, why can't you?" I felt horrible, but I couldn't pretend. I told her she is John, she has my ex-wife, she has friends, she's surrounded by people who love her. She shot back, "But other than ex-wife, those aren't my parents." All I could say was, "Neither am I." She broke down. My wife and I stepped out to give them some privacy. Later that evening, my son and I found ourselves alone. He looked exhausted. He explained that after Mother's Day, Abby kept calling Sally, insisting that they were both my daughters, that I couldn't be close with one, and not the other, and that it was them against me. But Sally, well, Sally let her have it. Words were exchanged. Grievances aired. John had to end the call before things got nuclear, but Abby was shaken. And now, Abby had convinced herself that I didn't mean what I'd been saying, I was only going through the motions for Sally's sake. My son told me he'd handle it. Spoiler alert, he did not. Now, every couple of days, Abby sends me text messages as if Sally and I are hiding some special relationship behind everyone's backs. She calls herself my secret daughter and laughs about it. She's invited my wife to lunch, pitching it as 2 out of 3 of his girls going out together. At family events, like a recent barbecue, she's turned up the pressure, hugging me tightly, insisting on photos with just me or with my wife and me, always with a few solo shots of just us for her to post with captions that really rub me the wrong way. This is really wearing on my wife. Abby keeps dreaming up plans for what my girls should do together, and she even planned Father's Day stuff for me that we had to shut down. She still managed to insert herself into the day. And when Abby gets emotional, my wife has a seriously soft spot for her, she always caves. My wife is a sweetheart, but it's starting to drive her crazy, too. I finally asked my son if he was upset with me. He said he wasn't, just that he wished all of this could be different. He told me we were good, but he was worried about his relationship with Sally. That's when I took a cue from some advice I'd heard and suggested premarital counseling. He said he'd talk to Sally about it, though. Now Abby is insisting Sally comes to her dress fitting. Honestly, that bridal shop should sell tickets, because if Sally is no longer holding back, there'll be a Royal Rumble worth seeing. I reminded my son that Sally loves him, and that I'd talk with her, but for right now, everything feels tense. Abby is driving my wife crazy with her sisterly bonding plans, driving me crazy with the constant dad-daughter content, pushing Sally to her limits, and just last night, sent me an email with 3 potential father-daughter dance styles and song choices. I feel as unheard and disrespected as ever. It's gotten to the point where the 6 of us rarely gather together, trying to keep the peace since that Father's Day blow-up, which, by the way, was going great until it absolutely crashed and burned at the end. I know this is long, but believe it or not, this is still the abridged version of just how wild things have gotten. We're supposed to meet up on Friday. Between Sally's partner and me, there's already a bet on how badly it'll all go down. Update 2. As I sit here, sipping a refreshing mojito while my wife enjoys her nojito, I can't help but feel that life is pretty good, at least for this moment. It seems the perfect time to entertain the world with tales of my pain and familial drama. The motivations come not only from my own desire to get it all off my chest but also from a cousin's persuasive plea, "Dude, you can't keep people hanging." How could I argue with that kind of logic? So much has happened, and I apologize in advance for the length, but here we go. First, my wife's pregnancy is progressing beautifully. I've focused all my energy on keeping her as stress-free and pampered as possible. This experience feels so different from my first time around, mostly because I'm so much more involved and my relationship with my wife now is infinitely stronger than the one I had with my ex. Sally, my daughter, has been fantastic throughout all of this. Even her partner's been wonderful, helping with the nursery, picking her up when I'm swamped, being just the kind of support you'd hope for in someone your kid loves. And there's a surprise in the works for my wife. My son, on his own initiative, has been quietly building a crib for the baby. He's modeling it after the one I made for him and his sister years ago, just to show my wife that he's behind her and that this baby is already loved. Now, my son's a good man, no matter what, I believe that. But he's got an undeniable soft spot for Abby, and that, I suppose, is where our quiet little family drama morphs into a monster movie. Cue Godzilla stomping through my life. I called a family meeting with my kids, determined to finally address the tension head on. I told John that his sister wasn't going to participate in wedding activities she didn't want to, and the emotional manipulation, guilting her into things, had to end. Sally looked relieved that she didn't have to say it herself, yet again. And I made it clear to him that if he didn't put a stop to Abby's persistent messages to me, I'd block her, and she'd know exactly why. It felt like we made progress. John seemed to get it. But a few days later, they both wanted another sit down. Sally and I decided it was time to clear the air, no matter what. They came to dinner at our house, and as soon as we sat down, Abby jumped immediately into baby shower talk. I told her bluntly, that sort of thing was exactly why we were having this conversation. I said I understood she was trying to fill a hole in her life, thinking she was getting a father, a second mother, she calls my ex-wife mom, and a sister. I said that was still possible, but only if she started listening to us and respecting our boundaries. I offered her a fresh start, as long as she agreed that, moving forward, she'd respect our limits. My daughter wasn't thrilled about this but loves her brother enough to try. Then Abby tried to negotiate, maybe, since we were starting over, we could define these relationships and just call ourselves family. I told her it doesn't work like that. It's got to happen naturally. She got upset at this, especially at the fact that I'm closer to Sally's partner than I am to her, as if she deserved my affection more because she tried so hard. Sally coolly pointed out maybe she could try the things the rest of us actually wanted. That was too much for Abby. She ran to the bathroom, John chased after her, and when I finally checked on them later, I heard her breaking down, repeating, "This is not what I wanted." The night dissolved after that. My wife, daughter, and her partner escaped to the patio for air. Eventually, I got a text that Abby and John had just left. The next day, I checked in with my son, and he told me they talked it over at home, and that Abby understood the need to back off. And for a couple of weeks, it seemed like maybe, miraculously, things would be okay. The barrage of texts stopped, except the occasional wedding-related question as the event approached. Abby stopped pushing herself on my wife and Sally, and I figured she was finally respecting our boundaries. Not to mention, the only reason they even got their wedding venue at such a good rate was because of my professional connections, and I'd made it clear I was willing to help but had zero interest in event planning hell, even if I'm pretty damn good at it. Then, out of nowhere, the venue called. The card I'd used for their expenses, reserved for large purchases thanks to the airline miles, had been declined. The limit's high, so I knew something was wrong. That's when I found out, to my horror, they'd changed the dates by 2 months, despite me having been clear about the deadlines. And now too close to the original date, I had lost the deposit. I was furious. I've been blessed, sure, but I'm not some throw money away kind of rich guy. I called my son, told him to get his ass to my house, alone. But of course, he showed up with Abby. The moment they walked in, Abby tried to greet me with a dad. I must have replied, "You have got to be effing kidding me," and went straight to the table. She even had the nerve to ask, "Where's dinner?" I didn't bother sugarcoating my response as I made it clear they weren't there for a meal. I turned to my son, hoping he'd level with me, and asked what was happening with the venue. Before he could answer, Abby started talking about wedding details, but he stopped her. He admitted they'd postponed because my ex-wife, his mom, had scheduled surgery and couldn't make the original date. He hadn't told me because he was trying to come up with the money to cover the loss himself and was in the process of telling the guests. And that's when Abby piped up with, "Incredibly, we have extra time to work on our dance." Around that time, my wife came home, and as I was walking her towards our bedroom, I heard Abby's comment. Calmly, I told her, "I have different feelings about that and will elaborate further shortly." I got my wife settled, water, her favorite symphonic covers playlist, then marched out to the two of them. I didn't hold back. "You are out of your effing mind, have you even been listening?" At that point, I'd had it with all the nonsense, the delusions, the sheer entitlement. I told Abby that it seemed she hadn't heard a word any of us had said before, that her head was firmly lodged where the sun doesn't shine. She sat there, stunned and quiet, finally, blessed silence, as I, unfiltered, explained exactly how Sally and I had experienced her relentless attempts to force us to love her, without actually knowing us or letting us choose openness. She started crying, stood up, and shouted, "Then what was this even for?" John asked, panicked, what she meant, if she meant their relationship, and started freaking out. Abby, frantic, said she meant delaying the wedding, because, here's the kicker, and I need another drink even thinking about it, it was all a ploy. My ex-wife and Abby agreed that if they just had more time, maybe I'd come around. My ex, apparently, told Abby not to worry about any lost money because, in her words, I am loaded. She's always hated that I make more now than I did when we were married, as if I did it to spite her instead of just earning it through my job. So not only had she lied to me, but to John as well, filling his head with the same stories. He looked utterly betrayed. Over and over, he said, "You lied to me." No spin could save it. He finally started letting it all out, all the ways he's defended her, covered for her, only to find out she was lying to him, too. Abby tried to turn it on my ex for poisoning her mind, on me for being stubborn, then wailed, "Why can't I just effing call him dad?" And, after all this time, John finally shouted, "Because he is not your effing dad." Abby melted into tears, mumbling something about how John was the one who told her she could call me that, and he spat back that he only meant she might be able to eventually, but she'd never given us even the chance. I told her again and again to slow down, to take a breath and think, but she just wouldn't listen. Suddenly, she broke down sobbing and went to sit on her chair, only she missed and ended up sprawled on the floor. As tense as things had been, I have to admit, there was something a bit comical about it. I caught myself chuckling, trying to hide my laughter behind my drink, but that only made her sob harder. I told her I needed to check on my wife and left the room, but as I was walking out, I heard her repeating, through her tears, I just want him to be my dad too. When I went outside, John was walking her to the door. He apologized to me, but I told him not to worry about it. They left soon after. A few days later, John came by to talk. He told me they'd had a long talk at home. He'd asked her outright if she would still have dated him if there was never any chance of joining my family. She told him yes, but confessed that I was a big draw as well. Hearing that, in that moment, I realized just how much the relationship I had with Sally, and the kind of father I am, was something she'd always wanted for herself. The way she said it, it clearly gave John doubts about whether she loved him for himself. I tried to help him see a way forward. I talked to him about marriage counseling, shared how his mother and I tried it. Even though it hadn't saved our own marriage, it provided us both with clarity and the benefit of an impartial voice. I pointed out how both he and Abby liked to come to me for advice, but that I couldn't truly be impartial for either of them. If they were serious about making things work, they needed to try counseling for real. Soon after, I got a text from Abby, asking if I was the one who suggested therapy. I replied, does it matter if John wants to? She pressed further, asking why it was so bad that she wanted to know what I thought. I told her, too bluntly maybe, that John was the man whose opinion should matter most to her now. That kicked off another fight between them, but ultimately, she agreed to counseling and they postponed the wedding. I won't lie, I may have done a little dance when I heard. So now, they're doing counseling. John says she's struggling with it, though I don't know the details, not really. She's been pressing to get me and Sally to come to a session with her. Sally told her she really didn't want to hear Sally unfiltered, and honestly, I have no interest in going either. For now, Abby's been leaving Sally alone and stopped texting me, except for the occasional generic question, which usually holds a not-so-hidden attempt to dig deeper. My wife still spends some time with her, especially since Abby is so absorbed in her pregnancy. Sometimes it's more than I'm comfortable with, but it's my wife's call. That's where we stand. Update 3. Well, I thought things had finally settled into some semblance of normalcy. My wife is now 7 months along, glowing and beautiful, and I've been doing everything I can to keep our little bubble of peace intact. John and Abby have been in therapy for about 3 months now, and honestly, I was starting to think we'd turned a corner. I should have known better. Last Tuesday, Sally called me in tears, ugly crying that I hadn't heard from her since she was 12 and broke her wrist falling off her bike. She could barely get the words out, but eventually managed to tell me that she'd found something on her partner's phone that she needed to show me. She asked if she could come over immediately, alone. When Sally arrived, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. She handed me her partner's phone with shaking hands and said, "Look at the Instagram messages." What I saw made my blood run cold. There were dozens of messages between Abby and Sally's partner, dating back nearly 2 months. It started innocently enough, Abby asking about Sally's favorite things for some supposed sisterly bonding gift. But it quickly escalated into something much more manipulative. Abby was playing therapist, asking probing questions about Sally's daddy issues, her relationship with me, whether Sally ever felt like she had to compete for my attention. She was essentially conducting her own psychological evaluation of my daughter through her girlfriend. The worst part? She was using this information to craft her approach with me. There were screenshots where Abby was analyzing my relationship with Sally, noting things like he always hugs her first when they both come over and he laughs more at her jokes. She'd even documented our family traditions, trying to figure out how to insert herself more naturally. But here's where it gets really twisted. Sally's partner had been responding, not just politely, but actually sharing private things about Sally, about our family dynamics, about conversations Sally thought were confidential. Things like how Sally sometimes worried I preferred John because he was more traditionally successful, or how she'd been anxious about the new baby taking attention away from her. Sally was devastated. Not just about the betrayal from her partner, but about how exposed and analyzed she felt. "Dad," she said, "she's been studying us like we're lab rats." I held Sally while she cried, and I'll admit, I was seeing red. This wasn't just boundary crossing anymore, this was calculated manipulation. I called John immediately and told him he needed to come over, now, and to bring Abby. When they arrived, Abby had this fake bright smile plastered on her face, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew something was up. John looked confused and tired. Therapy had been taking a toll on him too. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I showed John the messages, watching his face change from confusion to horror to anger. Abby tried to explain it away. She was just trying to understand the family better. She wanted to be closer to Sally. She thought if she could figure out what made our relationships work, she could build something similar. "You were manipulating my girlfriend to spy on my sister," John said, his voice deadly quiet. "This is insane, Abby." That's when Abby completely lost it. She started screaming that we were all against her, that Sally was poisoning everyone's mind, that I was playing favorites and would never give her a real chance. But then, and this is where my stomach dropped, she yelled, "Fine. You want to know the truth? Your precious Sally isn't so perfect either." Before anyone could stop her, she blurted out that Sally's partner had told her about Sally's struggles with an eating disorder in college, something Sally had never shared with me and had asked her partner to keep private. The betrayal was so complete, so vicious, that Sally actually gasped like she'd been physically struck. John was staring at Abby like he'd never seen her before. "How could you do that?" he whispered. "How could you use something so personal as a weapon?" Abby realized she'd gone too far, tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Sally was sobbing again, John was pacing like a caged animal, and I was trying to figure out how to fix something that felt completely broken. That's when my wife appeared in the doorway. She'd heard the shouting from upstairs. One look at Sally and she immediately went into protective mode, asking what happened. When I quickly explained, my wife, my sweet, patient wife who always tries to see the best in everyone, looked at Abby and said, "I think you need to leave now." As they were leaving, John pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, and the way he said it, with such defeat, broke my heart. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. This isn't the person I fell in love with." That was 5 days ago. Since then, Sally has been staying with us while she figures out what to do about her relationship. Her partner has been calling nonstop, trying to explain, but Sally isn't ready to talk. Meanwhile, John has been radio silent, which honestly has me more worried than all of Abby's dramatics combined. Yesterday, my ex-wife called. Apparently, Abby had shown up at her house, crying and asking if she could stay there because John had asked her to move out temporarily. My ex, true to form, launched into a lecture about how I was destroying that poor girl and how I should step up and be the father she needs. I told my ex exactly what I thought about her role in enabling this behavior, and let's just say it wasn't pretty. I may have mentioned that encouraging someone's delusions isn't love, it's cruelty, and that she was welcome to deal with the consequences of her advice. The call ended with her hanging up on me, but not before she said something that's been eating at me. "Just wait until you see what desperation looks like." I don't know what that means, but knowing my ex and Abby's pattern of escalation, I'm not looking forward to finding out. Right now, I'm just focused on taking care of Sally and my wife. Sally's been helping with nursery preparations, and it's been good for her to have something positive to focus on. My wife keeps saying she's proud of how I handled everything, but honestly, I feel like I failed somewhere along the way. John texted me this morning, "Can we talk soon? Just us?" I said yes, of course, but I'm dreading what he might tell me. Part of me wonders if this whole situation has made him realize some things about Abby that he wasn't ready to see before. As for Abby, I haven't heard from her directly, but Sally's partner mentioned seeing her at their coffee shop yesterday, apparently asking the barista questions about Sally's usual order and whether she comes in with me regularly. Even now, even after everything, she's still watching. Still trying to figure out how to insert herself into our lives. I used to think the worst thing about this situation was how exhausting it was. Now I'm starting to think the worst part is that it might not be over.